Hey, thanks for tuning in. Today's talk is dry fire. So a few people have asked me, Ty, what do you do for dry fire? And unfortunately, the answer is not much. I am trying to get better about it, and I have picked up some of these mini targets to help myself around the house, and I can screw around the basement and start pointing at stuff besides doorknobs. But before I had these targets, I would just point at doorknobs and random things around the house that were smaller and more difficult to aim at. So what do I practice and what am I looking to get out of dry fire? Like I said, I don't do much, but there are a couple things that I do try to focus on. And that's probably going to be draws and transitions. Maybe some movement, which is going to just be getting in and out of things, or like a quick sidestep, for instance. So I practice draw, transition, maybe a little bit of sidestepping. So we'll start off with just basic draw. I have nothing fancy that I do. I'm literally just going to practice, the gun's unloaded, mags are unloaded. So I'm shooting my Prodigy, of course. It does have a safety. I suck at turning the safety on and off, and it affects my grip. So I am focused on getting a good grip and getting the safety off within a reasonable amount of time. I don't have the world's fastest draw. I'm probably like 1.10 to 150, depending on the distance. But my main priority is that when I grab the gun, that I actually have a good grip and I get the safety off and point the gun, and I try and look at something small. So if you have these targets, that's great, set them out, but I probably look 7 to 10 yards and I try and point at a doorknob. And the biggest trick is to be honest with yourself. There are tons of people doing dry fire stuff that they just rip the gun up and just let it fly and say that they tell themselves that they hit the target. But be honest with yourself. When you point that gun at something and you see the dot on the target or your iron sights lined up, be honest whether you think you would have hit it or not. Don't just point it in that direction. So really focus on aiming the gun. Be honest with yourself when you're doing it. So on my draw, like I said, it's that initial grip. The draw is probably one of the most important things to practice, and it's not for the speed, right? Over like 10 stages, half a second every stage because you drew faster is going to help you a ton. But I think the most important part is getting a good grip. So there's nothing worse than when you start a stage off and there's like a ton of targets in front of you, right? Real high speed stage, and you've got a bad grip because you tried to snatch that gun as quick as you could. Your grip is off, and now the gun is not tracking straight through recoil. So I'm kind of okay having a slightly slower draw if I can get a really good grip on the gun, because once I grip that gun, I'm not changing it the rest of the stage, right? Once you grab that gun, it's glued in that position, and I'm going with it the rest of the stage. I guess the other thing you can do as well is reloads. Reloading, I don't think many people have won matches with reloads because you should be practicing reloads in the right location, but not fumbling the reload is pretty damn important. So the things I'm looking for when reloading is just basic manipulation, right? Point the gun, drop the mag, insert a new one, that sort of thing. Nothing fancy here. I'm not the greatest reloader, but play around with your reloads. Put a mat down on the floor, let them hit the floor. Things to focus on are getting mag oriented, feeling comfortable, try not to break your grip too much, and And then transitions. Transitions are probably one of the most important things to practice because it's a time saver. I'm sure most of you have seen someone shoot Steel Challenge that was slower than you, and you looked at like, man, they're looking they're taking a long time from one target to the next. I mean, Steel Challenge is literally just transitions because you're only going for 5 targets and it's just the time in between each one. But it's amazing how much faster some of the top shooters can transition, and that is time saved. Yeah, that is a ton of time saved. So what I would look at is some of your larger swings and smaller swings. What do I mean by that? So you can have some targets closer together, you can have some of them stacked, and the goal is just to reduce the time it takes you to aim from one to the other. Larger swings are going to be super important as well, especially with all these heavy guns everyone runs these days. If you have a 50-ounce gun or you have a Shadow 2 with brass grips on it, try and practice some really wide transitions. And I mean going from here to pivoting and swinging your hips back and forth and getting the gun stopped between targets. Because when you start swinging a 50-something ounce gun, it is going to be really hard to just stop that gun on a dime. So practice your big swings and practice the short transitions. And I like to think of stacked targets. We see them more and more. Stacked targets can be really easy to screw up, even though they're super close. So practice your short swings and your wide swings. And so side steps. What should you be practicing for entrance and exit? I try and think of scenarios in my matches that I could have done better. So I like to rewatch my stages and think to myself, where can I save time? And if you look at a lot of the top shooters, you're going to see their entrance and exits are extremely fast. So things to think about is when you're coming into a shooting area, so whether it be a shooting box or let's say you're about to lean around a wall. So the idea is I'm going to keep my gun up the whole time. If you watch these top guys, that gun is up the majority of the match. They aren't running with the gun down unless it's like uprange, but you don't see them taking their support hand off often. And when they're running around a barrier and they're about to shoot, they're looking through the barrier and that gun is up as they come around. They're not doing this and then come up. They're keeping it up the whole time as they walk and as they move in and out of shooting positions. You can save a ton of time there. Think about it. If your gun is down like this, or you do this coming around a wall, you're having to present the gun all over again, and that is probably, even if you're fast, what, quarter second just to go from here to here, and that's pretty honest. But if the gun's already up, quarter second saved without even having to shoot better. So movement is king because we're on a race here, right? This is a bit of a foot race, so getting in and out of areas is going to help you a ton.